April 14, 2025. At 2:17 p.m., deep inside the digital archives of the University of Cambridge, a research assistant named Clara Whitmore stumbled upon a file that should not have existed. Labeled only with a string of random numbers and letters, EK9X3 A01_97B, the file was buried beneath layers of deprecated data clusters and password-protected logs dating back over 2 decades. Cambridge's restricted servers were known to contain forgotten research, abandoned theses, and encrypted scientific logs. But this file was different. The moment Clara decrypted its shell, her terminal glitched for a fraction of a second. Then it played in audio waveform. The voice that followed sent chills through her spine. "This is a question I have studied more than I have publicly admitted," it said. The metallic, synthesized voice was unmistakable: Stephen Hawking. Over the next hour, a small team gathered around Clara's workstation in stunned silence. What they were hearing sounded like a private interview or conversation, never meant for public release. The file metadata identified the timestamp as early 2002 and the location tag as Cambridge Private Lab 14. Most curious of all, the file's embedded note read, "Consciousness Beyond Quantum Echo." Dr. Elias Moreau, a young physicist known for his work in quantum entropy, was notified immediately. Elias had long been fascinated by fringe theories, ideas that hovered between science and forbidden speculation. The fact that Hawking, a titan of theoretical physics, had spoken of consciousness as quantum information shook him deeply. The audio progressed. The interviewer, voice scrambled, identity unknown, posed a daring question. If information cannot be destroyed in a black hole, could the same apply to human consciousness after death? A pause. Then Hawking responded, "Consciousness may not be a byproduct of the brain alone. It may be a distributed quantum structure, and if that is true, it does not end with biological death." The implications were seismic. By the end of the day, Elias had secured authorization from the university's internal ethics board to investigate the file's origin. As he and Clara began dissecting the metadata, they uncovered another anomaly: a buried GPS coordinate. When plotted on a map, it pointed not to Cambridge, but to a location near Geneva, Switzerland, an area tied to a defunct CERN testing site. That night, Elias received an anonymous message from a burner email address. The subject line read simply, "He knew more than you think." Attached was a fragment of code, raw binary data, that when translated, revealed a partial transcription from the same interview. It included a cryptic statement from Hawking: "Not all patterns survive. Only those that evolve continue." Was this a scientific version of reincarnation? A new model of soul mechanics? Elias wasn't alone in asking those questions. Within 48 hours, a small task force was formed. It included Clara, a hacker-turned-digital archivist named Raul Takaoka from Japan, and Dr. Amira El-Hadi, a neurologist from Cairo with a background in neuroinformatics. Each brought a critical piece of the puzzle. The working hypothesis: the file was a remnant from a classified initiative, possibly tied to an unacknowledged research cell Hawking had either supervised or consulted for in his later years. Something connected to consciousness, memory, and quantum theory. And someone didn't want it found. But it was too late. The shadows had whispered, and the world was about to listen. Elias Moreau's plane touched down in Geneva 3 days later. The coordinates embedded in Hawking's audio file had led him to a nondescript location on the outskirts of the city, a fenced-off compound labeled as a decommissioned CERN magnetic testing site. Officially, it had been inactive since 2003. Unofficially, it was a black box. Inside CERN's central archive, access was predictably difficult. Files tagged Echo Project were heavily redacted, but not entirely erased. With assistance from Raul Takaoka, who breached several obsolete layers of the CERN intranet, Elias uncovered internal references to a lab known only as Sub-Level Theta. This underground annex, built beneath a former magnetics hall, was reportedly used for advanced neuroquantum interface testing between 2001 and 2004. The project's leader, Dr. Mark Uler, a physicist once renowned for his work on quantum coherence and entangled systems, Uler had mysteriously vanished in mid-2004. One journal article had cited him, then suddenly retracted. No public record of his death existed, yet his name had disappeared from scientific directories. The deeper Elias dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. In a declassified logistics manifest, he found shipments of custom optical sensors, cryogenic systems, and something labeled as phase-state neural encoders. These were not typical physics instruments. Amira, reviewing the list remotely from Cairo, confirmed they were used in cutting-edge brain mapping, years ahead of their time. Whatever they were measuring, she said, it wasn't particles, it was consciousness. Using satellite imagery and dated security schematics, Elias and Raul located an entry shaft to sublevel Theta behind a storage hangar. Most of the entrances had been welded shut, but one, partly obscured by overgrown ivy and rusted metal, still bore a functional keycard reader. With Clara's help back in Cambridge, Elias cloned an old researcher's ID from a recovered CERN access log. On the night of April 22nd, he descended into the forgotten lab. What he found defied all logic. The interior was intact, like a time capsule sealed and abandoned. Desks still held papers with cryptic waveforms and annotations in Uler's handwriting. One chamber, cylindrical, shielded with lead and copper mesh, was labeled Echo Chamber 4. Its walls were embedded with fiber optic strands and quartz nodes, forming what Amira later called a neural containment lattice. In the center, a terminal powered by an independent generator still functioned. Raul decrypted its OS and found a folder titled COGNITIVETRACE Live Logs. Inside were time-stamped video entries of test subjects before and after clinical death. Most disturbing were the logs from Test 14. A man in his 70s was shown hooked to a neural interface, monitored by an entire team including Uler himself. When the man flatlined, a burst of quantum interference filled the chamber. Sensors recorded sustained readings for 4 minutes post-mortem. No explanation, no follow-up. The next log entry was blank. This wasn't just research. This was evidence. Evidence that human consciousness left measurable traces after death. And then came the final blow. In a hidden subdirectory was a LAS file, a single frame from the lab's surveillance system, time-stamped 2 days after the facility's supposed closure. In it, Mark Uler stood alone inside Echo Chamber 4. He was staring directly into the camera and smiling. The story broke quietly at first. A scientific blog in Argentina reported a case of a 6-year-old boy named Mateo who claimed to have memories of a laboratory filled with shimmering walls and floating lights. He drew symbols no one in his family recognized. Symbols that Amira, upon review, matched to neural interface schematics used in Echo Chamber 4. Within days, Raul uncovered 6 more similar reports scattered across the globe. A girl in Osaka who recited sequences of binary that mapped to CERN's testing logs. A child in Morocco who spoke German fluently despite no exposure. A boy in Texas who described a device resembling the phase-state neural encoder. They were scattered across continents, yet their words painted the same picture. Memories that did not belong to them. Places they had never visited. Languages they had never heard. Data no one outside the Echo project could know. Amira coined a term, cognitive echo carriers. Each of these children had been born between 2014 and 2017, 10 years after the last known echo experiment. It was as if something, or someone, had chosen to transfer residual consciousness into new biological vessels. In Cairo, Amira personally interviewed a girl named Layla. She was 8, spoke 3 languages, and consistently referenced concepts in neurobiology far beyond her years. During a test, Amira showed her waveforms taken from Test 14. The child calmly whispered, "That's when I left the chamber." Meanwhile in Texas, Elias visited the family of the boy who described the neural encoder. His name was Jonah. In a hushed voice, he told Elias, "The lights were loud when the man died, but his thoughts stayed behind. I remember floating." These weren't isolated cases. They were converging testimonies. Clara plotted the locations and birth dates. A pattern emerged. All born during solar minimum years, clustered around specific gravitational anomalies, mapped in 2013 by ESA's swarm satellites. Raoul, digging deeper into CERN's digital vaults, recovered a confidential protocol titled Q-cycle reentry. It described theoretical models in which quantum informational structures could reattach to resonant neural networks, if those networks were in development during precise cosmological alignments. Translation: consciousness patterns from the ECHO project may have survived and embedded themselves into children whose brains were in the right state at the right time. But there was more. Among the recovered documents was a letter addressed to Uler, signed only with the initials EH. It read, "Some echoes return not randomly, but because they must. Memory is the anchor, resonance is the key, and pattern compatibility determines survival. You must not let the next cycle pass without verification." Elias believed the letter was from Hawking himself. It confirmed what he had long suspected. This wasn't a malfunction, it was a design. By the end of April, Elias, Amira, and Raoul had compiled over 20 documented cases of children demonstrating what they now called inherited informational signatures. What had once been whispers were now waves, and those waves were carrying something ancient and intelligent. The echoes had returned, and they were waking up. The deeper they went, the more the boundaries between life, death, and information blurred. By early May, Elias and Amira were spending long nights piecing together recovered data from sublevel theta and comparing it to Hawking's hidden audio monologue. What emerged was not mere coincidence. It was a unifying theory. Consciousness, Hawking posited in the lost recording, was not simply a function of the brain, but a quantum phenomenon embedded in the very fabric of space-time. Just as a black hole does not erase information, he said, neither does death erase identity. It changes its mode of existence. Amira mapped brainwave patterns of the identified cognitive echo carriers and discovered unexpected resonance spikes at specific frequencies, ones associated with deep REM sleep and induced theta states in near-death experiences. These spikes mirrored waveforms from the echo chamber experiments. "That's not a coincidence," she told Elias. "They're not remembering, they're syncing." This revelation reframed the team's understanding. Memory wasn't just biological storage. It was quantum entanglement with past informational fields. If a consciousness pattern survived its original biological form, it could theoretically link to a new neural network, creating what Elias called a continuum imprint. Meanwhile, Raoul decrypted a fragment of a 2003 document tagged as Echo Final Analysis. It read, "We observed interference fields similar to those in quantum tunneling. The subjects are not dying, they are phase shifting. Informational patterns remain detectable beyond 300 seconds post-cessation." The implications were immense. It meant that the mind, or some structured aspect of it, existed in a measurable, persistent field beyond physical death. Echoes indeed. The document also referenced a theoretical construct named Elysium Loop, a model in which recurring consciousnesses follow a cycle of activation, decay, and rebirth governed not by spirituality, but by compatibility with evolving neural architectures. A scientific reincarnation model. "That's what Hawking meant by evolution of patterns," Elias muttered. "The universe isn't saving everyone, just the data worth keeping." On May 3rd, Clara cross-referenced birth records of the 20 identified children with geomagnetic event logs. 19 of them had been born during localized magnetic fluctuations linked to solar anomalies. It wasn't random, it was timed. A final chilling confirmation came when Amira compared the neural response of one child, Jonah, during sleep. His brain emitted a sharp spike at 3:17 a.m., the same waveform recorded during Subject 14's death event in 2003. When gently awakened, Jonah whispered something that froze them all. "He's still talking." In the light, Amira trembled. "He means Uler." It wasn't just that the dead left something behind. They were still there, transmitting. The Echo project, long thought buried, had created a pathway, and now it was open. Not everyone would survive this truth, but those who did might no longer be entirely human. They might be something else, something designed to remember. The decrypted data had led them this far, but it was an anonymous message that shifted the course of the investigation. Sent to Elias's encrypted inbox, the message contained no sender, No subject line, only a text file named Protocol of Consciousness Evolution.txt and a cryptic sentence. This is not the end. This is the instruction. The document opened with a quote from Hawking himself. "The fear of death is the fear of losing form, but information does not disappear. We do not die, we transform." The file wasn't just a philosophical musing, it was a design document. Hawking had written it alongside two unnamed collaborators in the final years of his life. It outlined a theory that consciousness was a persistent informational structure subject to universal laws of entropy, resonance, and feedback. Embedded within the protocol was a branching decision tree based on pattern stability, environmental resonance, and neural compatibility. Amira read the file in silence, then said, "This isn't a theory, it's a survival algorithm. According to the protocol, only informational structures capable of adaptation, growth, emotional evolution, increased coherence, were able to remain intact beyond biological death. Others degraded into chaos. It was natural selection at the level of thought. The implications staggered the team. Humanity wasn't just living and dying, it was participating in a cosmic filtration system." Clara found another layer buried in the metadata, coordinates, 3 of them. Each led to one of the children already identified as cognitive echo carriers. But the final coordinate pointed to an unknown location, a mountain cave system in southern Chile. Within days, Elias and Raul were on a flight. Inside the cave, hidden beneath layers of volcanic rock, they found a sealed chamber, not ancient, but modern. Military-grade locks and biometric scanners lined the entrance. After hours of bypassing systems, they entered what appeared to be a monitoring outpost. Inside were 5 sleeping pods. Only one was active. The pod's occupant, a child, no older than 9, suspended in cryostasis. On the display above him, a phrase blinked repeatedly. "Pattern compatible. Do not interrupt." Raul's voice cracked. They were cultivating a successor. Back in Geneva, Amira and Clara finished decoding the final portion of the Hawking protocol. It detailed a warning. If compatibility thresholds are bypassed, informational corruption occurs. Not all patterns are stable. Not all echoes are benevolent. For the first time, the team grasped the darker side of the Echo project. It wasn't just about continuation, it was about control. Someone, or something, had begun selecting which echoes were allowed to return and which were not, a form of digital reincarnation curation. Elias stared at the image of the cryopod. This is no longer a question of science. This is a question of destiny. And the echoes weren't just speaking, they were choosing who would be the future and who would be forgotten. The final phase began quietly. On May 12, 2025, the team returned to Cambridge with their findings. They had collected over 1 terabyte of decrypted data, 26 verified cases of cognitive echo carriers, the full transcription of the Hawking protocol, and, most chillingly, a live subject preserved in cryostasis, bearing an active quantum-compatible imprint. News of their discovery hadn't reached the public. Not yet, but signs of interference began immediately. Elias's access to the CERN archive was revoked without explanation. Amira's university network was remotely wiped. Raul received a blank subpoena from an unnamed agency. Clara found surveillance bugs in her apartment. It was clear someone else knew. They debated whether to go dark or release everything. Amira, ever the pragmatist, wanted to vanish and continue the work underground. Raul insisted on broadcasting the truth, but it was Elias who said what none of them wanted to admit. If we don't tell the world, someone else will use it, and not for good. On May 14th, the group uploaded the full Echo archive to a decentralized data network with quantum encryption. Within 24 hours, the file had over 2 million unique downloads. The world woke up to a storm. Academics called it pseudoscience. Governments called it a hoax. Religious leaders declared it heresy. But people listened. Forums exploded with testimonies, dreams, flashes of impossible memories. Some felt peace, others dread. Among them were more children. In Indonesia, a boy named Raffi began writing equations from a lost Soviet neural study. In Finland, twins recalled identical dreams of floating inside a sphere of light. In Argentina, Matteo, the first carrier, entered a sleep state and spoke in a synthetic voice. The gate has opened. Phase 2 begins. Amira confirmed that Matteo's brainwaves matched those of the boy in cryostasis. Two distinct informational fields, one signature. The echoes were not just data, they were synchronizing. The team gathered one final time, off-grid, in a secure research cabin in Iceland. Elias reviewed the last message hidden in the Hawking protocol. It was not a warning, it was a map, pointing to potential convergence events over the next 2 decades, including global crises, technological shifts, and the emergence of pattern catalysts. Humanity, it seemed, was entering a stage of informational evolution. Only those who adapt, the protocol read, will remain coherent. Clara closed the file. So what now? Raoul looked out at the glacier beyond the window. Now we watch who comes back. Elias stood in silence. He understood that their journey had uncovered more than science. They had witnessed a truth far older than civilization. That consciousness does not belong to us. We are merely its vessels. As the northern lights shimmered overhead, a final voice echoed from Matteo's last recording, as if whispered across time. You are not the beginning, you are the continuation. And in that moment, they knew. We do not die, we transform.